Hey guys, it's Kelsey. I'm back with another scrapbooking process video, and today we have another Scrap 5 challenge. So for this one, we had to use at least 2 photos, at least 3 photo mats, at least have 1 layer torn or distressed. We had to use either gems or enamel dots, and we had to use either ribbon or twine. So that is a really fun recipe for me. I have 2 photos right off the bat. This is again when I was working with Cavalia. You guys have seen a lot of these layouts lately, so I don't know why I keep saying that on every single one, but these are the couple of the writers and the performers that I became friends with while we worked here, so I wanted to record the few pictures I had with them. I know right away I need to have at least 3 photo mats, so I'm trying to do that kind of first, at least get 2 of them out of the way. I am using Maggie Holmes' Gather collection. Again, really trying to stash bust my Maggie Holmes still. I did that a lot last month, but I'm kind of dragging it into this month as well. I wanted to get I use this marbly paper as my inspiration, but I don't actually end up using that paper on the collection. But I'm trying to look at that and figure out my color scheme. I knew I really wanted to use this wood grain as my background just because it was a really nice neutral, and I knew I could use a lot. I'd feel more comfortable using a lot of different colors on a more neutral background. So that's my goal. I did mat both photos in a plain white cardstock, but we had to use at least 3 pattern paper mats, so that one doesn't count. So I am going to use this soft pink. It's actually a ballerina paper, but because I use so little of it, you can't see it's ballerinas. You just see this really soft pink around the edge. And then I'm going to mat both of those on the floral from this collection, which again has some pinks, but also introduces some green, which is nice because I'm really wanting to pull in some of the green from this collection. So those are 2 mats right away, and you can see I'm distressing both of them. So I already have my distressing done. We only had to distress or tear one of the layers, but once I started distressing, I just wanted to do it on all of them. So you can see I distressed both of those once I got this second one matted here. And I have another scrap of this floral, and you'll see that I pull that in later to fussy cut some of those florals as embellishment. I really love when I can use a layer like that as a frame and as a fussy cut embellishment, just because it really pulls the whole page together and makes everything look like it goes together. But just distressing the second mat, I'm thinking I'm going to have these photos stacked vertically but staggered slightly. And so when I do that, I'm kind of thinking I'll have another layer run vertically behind both of these, and that'll be my 3rd layer that'll kind of mat them together. I'm thinking at first it might be this marbly paper, but once I get this distressed and laid it on the marble and this floral really ran together and looked kind of confusing and busy. So I take the marble paper off and go for something a little bit more toned down. I have a scrap. Actually, it's not a scrap. It's a 6x6 from the 6x6 paper pad that I threw in with my 12x12 stuff. So I would use it. But I have a black and white, kind of very subtle floral that I decided to use as my long vertical piece, just so I had something a little bit more toned down. You can see me reaching for these other scraps. I really wanted to use this unicorn paper just because it is a magical horse type show, but the color scheme just wasn't working. So I really like this green diamond print, but I kind of wanted to hoard it to use as a background. I have it pulled out for my color inspiration because I really love that green, but I end up not using that either. I'm thinking maybe I'll pull a ticket in at some point to help with my layers. So I'm going to go ahead and trim out this peach toned one because I really like how that color goes, but really, I'm just procrastinating finding my 3rd layer here because I know I need a 3rd layer for this recipe. So I'm just going to trim out this peach colored ticket, and then there I finally find my 3rd layer. So like I said, it's only a 6x6 paper, so I'm going to trim it and kind of stretch it behind one of the photos so it looks like it's a longer piece than it is. But again, I'm going to distress that as well. I really like the way Maggie Holmes products look distressed, so once I started I couldn't stop. And I'm just going to go around all corners of that before I glue it down, but that'll be my 3rd layer. So that kind of is my design. Now I just need to embellish, which is a fun part. I've mentioned before I don't have a lot of Maggie Holmes embellishment, so I lean heavily on the fussy cuttable papers for my embellishment. So I already know I have that strip of tickets to use. I already know I have that floral pattern paper I can cut some florals from, so that's what I'm going to go to first to try and figure out my clusters. But I have my 2 photos, I have my 3 photo mats, I have my distressed edge. The only other thing I need is gems or enamel dots, which I'm thinking I'll go for enamel dots, and then ribbon and twine, I'm thinking I'll go for twine. Both of those I can kind of tuck in at the end, so I'm not too worried about that right now. I'm just going to focus on embellishing and finishing out my design, and then I can go revisit the recipe at the end to make sure I have everything. But it's definitely not hard for me to get enamel dots on as a finishing touch, or even twine, so I'm not too worried about those right now. But here you can see I fussy cut 3 separate floral clusters, and I'm just trying to arrange them to create kind of a visual triangle. I'm wanting one over in a corner, and then the other 2 kind of coming out from my photo cluster on 2 separate angles. So that's what I'm doing there. And I'm thinking it's Maggie Holmes. I love how doilies look with Maggie Holmes. And I recently did that layout using a glassine bag and a doily, and I've fallen in love with that all over again. So I'm going to do that 3 separate times on this layout, because once I find something that I like or revisit something I used to love to do, I can't stop doing it. So we're just going to do that a bunch on this layout. I put it in that one cluster where that kind of more vertical floral bit is right there. And once I kind of glue it down, I'm like, yeah, I want that in every single cluster. But that kind of fills in that space a little bit. I think that looks super cute. I'm going to glue that floral back down, and now I'm going to go pretty much do that in the other 2 clusters. So I'm working on that left-hand cluster now. I only need a scrap of a doily, so I think I only used one. I had a scrap of a doily, and then I used a scrap of another doily, I think. So I didn't even use a whole doily on this page, but it looks like I used a lot because I had it peeking out of 3 separate areas. But there's that. Getting that other doily down. I almost get stuck when I finish the doily glassine bag clusters, but then I remembered I had my little ticket to use. So I ended up trimming that ticket into 3 separate pieces and tucking that into each cluster. And then after that, I think it looks like a nice little completed cluster. My favorite kind of clusters have these bigger icons, but then they cluster a bunch of smaller things on top. I didn't really have another bunch of smaller things to throw on here. But I actually kind of liked how the clusters looked larger and there wasn't a lot of tiny things, especially because I know I am going to throw in some enamel dots at the end. So I'm actually trying to keep these clusters a little bit more bare with these kind of larger visual pieces, which I think is nice. But I'm happy with how those are looking, so I'm going to go ahead and glue this down to the background. Again, I'm really trying not to gut Maggie Holmes stuff. This stuff has just been in my stash for so long. I'm trying to not stretch it. I need to get it used because I know it might shock several of you that I didn't gut the wood grain. But I need to get Maggie Holmes stuff used up, and I have a lot of wood grain in my stash because I hoard it, so I didn't feel too bad about covering up this one. But now that I have these bits glued down, I'm going to go in with my little tickets and tuck those into each cluster. I really like how that brings that peach around. I love how my visual triangles are so clear through these clusters. I really love how they have the same types of thing in each cluster, but again, they're not identical because they're different flowers, different lengths of the tickets, that kind of thing, but it's all it flows together and it all coordinates. So getting that last ticket on here. That's pretty much it. I need to do my enamel dots, and I need to do my twine. So first I'm going to revisit my enamel dots. I want literal dots, but I also had these enamel hearts that were perfect. They were the perfect shade of green. So I'm going to go ahead and use all of these beautiful green hearts, and then I'll go in with some of the pink enamel dots to cluster with the hearts. And then once I kind of figured out those were the colors I would do, I wanted to get my twine on here too. I think I would have preferred to do twine bundles versus having it like this, but this is kind of a stiffer twine, and I just didn't think it would lay properly if I tried to do the bundles. So I decided just to staple it down coming out of each of the clusters, just so you have that little bit of texture coming out of each area. But yeah, I think it would look nicer if I had bundles and it was more of a rounded element versus coming out in these little, I don't know what you want to call those, tails. But I really love how the twine texture kind of brings the brown in from this wood grain of the background. And again, this is a horse barn, so I feel like twine's really appropriate. The photos, the top one is me and Veronica and one of her horses, Quibro. That's the one she rides in the jumping sequence when they do the jumping scene. I love her. She's one of the 2 American riders. Most of the other riders are Canadian. There's a couple from France. They kind of reach all over. But most of the riders are Canadian because Cavalia is based out of Montreal. But Veronica and her twin sister are the 2 American riders. And you saw her sister, Angelica, already. She was in the page about Merlin, where she's riding that really big gray draft horse, and she looks like a little girl. And then the bottom photo is me and Sebastian. But here are the close-ups. That's pretty much all I needed to do. I did a little bit of journaling, and that is it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you check out everyone else playing along with Scrap 5, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.